and let us all do we can to build a better future. Okay, we got to bring this up again. I want to pull up some more highlights of the RFK Jr. Hearing that puts censorship and misinformation in the center stage. Now, what was really interesting and telling is how the Republicans, let's face it, I'm not a fan of both parties, but the Republicans were allowing RFK Jr., who's running in the Democratic nomination, to speak because he was brought before the House to talk about censorship. And the Democrats were on this super fast rush to censor him and silence him. It was rather frightening to see and watch. A lot of accusations, a lot of smearing. Now, look, I'm not voting Democrat. Okay, so if you're RFK Jr. supporter, good luck to you in this fight for the Democratic primary. The game is rigged. The only thing I'll tell you is document everything on how this primary plays out. And no, there's a lot of things I disagree with RFK Jr. However, when it comes down to censorship and misinformation, we have some points in which we agree. I am against censorship. Hardlands Media has been censored not once, but 8 times. It's not a lot of fun to go through. It really sucks. It truly does. So I want to pull up this article here first from The Hill, because then we also got some highlight video clips and talk about it. So RFK Jr. hearing put censorship, misinformation, fights at the center stage. A House hearing yesterday, Thursday, featuring Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., brought the complicated debate about balancing free speech with fighting misinformation to center stage. Some of the debate played out in real time among members of Congress and the hearing witnesses. The House Judiciary Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government hearing on censorship started with some early demonstrations of the partisan divide. Everybody's favorite person in the world, Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, made a motion to move the committee into executive session, closing the hearing to the public over concerns about Kennedy's statements on the pandemic. She argued that the testimony from Kennedy, who said in a video published by the New York Post that the pandemic was targeted to go after, Jewish people and Chinese people, could defame or degrade people. Republicans successfully blocked the motion. I watched it. Ranking members, Delegate Stacey Plaskett, who of the Virgin Islands, also raised concerns with the committee giving Kennedy 10 minutes to deliver his opening statement instead of the usual 5 minutes allotted to the witness. If you want to cut him off and censor him some more, you're welcome to do it. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, representative of Ohio, said, eliciting laughs in the rooms. So let's talk about it. Let's bring up some more highlights. Again, we need to talk about censorship, what it means, and what it does to people. Hardlands Media had to go through this numerous times, and it nearly ended us. Censorship is never the answer. I want to pull up this tweet here from the Vigilant Fox. They managed to capture a couple of videos. So let's talk about government censorship. Now, I don't care where you stand on the political spectrum. I don't care whether you are Republican, Libertarian, Green, Socialist, Democrat, Communist, Independent. I don't care what generation you're part of, how old you are, the color of your skin, who you worship. You do have a voice, and it needs to be heard. And I do believe, and yes, this is my opinion, that this world is filled with good people. And in this country, there are a lot of people who are just scared and concerned and frightened of the overall path that neoliberalism has taken us on. But we all have a voice. And to silence one voice puts us all on the chopping block. And that's not right.
What are the ramifications if we don't talk about it, if we don't expose it? And I only have 25 seconds, so Mr. Sauer, take it away.
If federal censorship is not stood up to aggressively, it will expand to every corner of online discourse.
Ms. Morris.
It's just this, I can't even believe this is a conversation. Like, this is not controversial or taboo. We live in the United States of America, and you have the right to say whatever you want, to print whatever you want, and to read whatever you want.
Mr. Kennedy.
A government that can censor its critics has license for every atrocity. It is the beginning of totalitarianism. There's never been a time in history when we look back and the guys who were censoring people were the good guys. All of us grew up reading Arthur Koestler, Robert Heinlein, Aldous Huxley, George Orwell, and they were all saying the same thing. Once you start censoring, you're on your way to dystopia and totalitarianism.
And I know my time has expired, but Mr. Sauer, you said earlier, censorship is about power. Censorship is about control. And the entire progressive leftist agenda is about nothing more than dependency and control. That is why this is so important. With that, I yield back.
Now, my only counter to that is, if given the same power, there's a lot of conservative Republicans who are in positions of power who would want to use censorship too. All right. And Democrats that are quote unquote progressive, like anything, the Democrats like to hijack a name. So thanks, Democrats, for screwing that up too. I also want to pull up this video here now so all of you can see it.
I mean, if we don't have a First Amendment, it's just, I'm frightened by where we go.
May I, Mr. Chairman?
You may not, you may not.
I just
Mr.
want to
Chair.
respond.
Mr. Chair,
I don't
the time
think,
is out. We're done.
I haven't adjourned.
Now, of course, this is the delegate from the Virgin Islands who, same person, was making a statement that Matt Taibbi should face 5 years in jail.
In the hearing, and I don't think you're the chair.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
Chairman's discretion.
I
We'll
know
let
it's
Mr.
your
Kennedy-
Chairman's discretion. Stop complaining.
discretion,
We're gonna
but
let Mr. Kennedy.
he
Mr.
has had so much additional time.
Well, I think everyone's had
Why?
additional time.
No,
and we're gonna
why?
get-
Why are you doing that specifically
Because-
for him?
Because
I
we
just
don't
want
believe,
to
opposed to other
explain
people.
I'm sure the
the
witness,
super PAC.
I'm sure the
On
Democrat
other
witness will be
places.
as short as he possibly can.
No,
I-
no. Are you going to allow our witness to just give another piece?
No,
of
let him
what-
address
I
the
want to
defamatory
acknowledge-
comment that was made
address-
about him that's untrue.
There,
I wanna-
that was not defamatory. That is a legal definition that was not met.
I want to acknowledge
it my-
information about the super PAC that
Yeah, let him speak. Come on. He's there. You tried to censor him. Let him speak. Let him speak.
you mentioned.
Go ahead.
I've just been told that that super PAC is connected to somebody that we have a connection to. It's not a super PAC that I've endorsed, and it's not one, as I said, that I've ever heard of.
Thank the gentleman for that statement, and I thank you for your testimony. The committee is now adjourned.
Now, I want to pull up something else here, too. Because, again, no one's perfect. No one is. But see, the thing is, when you start going back and start saying this person is this person is, just remember, don't throw stones if you live in a glass house. The reason why is because of this.
The ranking member said she was deeply concerned about the affiliation, and we seem to have a guilty by association theme going on here. And so I just have to state for the record that I myself am deeply concerned about the affiliation of the convicted sex trafficker, Jeffrey Epstein, of which the ranking member took campaign donation money from. So I think that's the beauty of the First Amendment, is that we have a right to say what we want to say, but we also have the right to be offended. So I just wanted to point that out.
As she should. Just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there. Again, Delegate Stacey Plaskett likes to throw stones. She's a delegate of the Virgin Islands. Isn't there like a questionable island around that area? Maybe yes, maybe no. I'll let you decide.
The founders of and the framers of our Constitution knew that democracy was a very inefficient system, and it had all of these built-in inefficiencies and difficulties. They said that they felt that it would give us the one thing that would give us an advantage over totalitarian systems was this capacity for the free flow of information and a complete lack of control of debate, so that ideas that would eventually mature into policies would be annealed in a furnace of debate and then rise through the marketplace of ideas rather than being dictated from above. And that's what would give the energy, the vibrancy, the vigor to democracy. When they invented this democracy, we were the first one in the modern era in 1780. By 1865, 5 other nations had imitated us. Today, it's 190 nations based upon our system. We are supposed to be the exemplary democracy, and the corner foundation stone of our system is freedom of speech. All of the other freedoms depend on it. If we lose that, not only do we lose our democracy in this country, but the entire world loses us as an example.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better.
Let's go ahead and bring up something else here, too. I want to give a shout out to a good friend of the show, Alan Myron, who's done some fantastic work. Let's talk about more about the censorship. Another highlight from the hearing.
Expired. Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from North Dakota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to yield my time to Representative Massey.
I thank the gentleman from North Dakota. Wow.
Now, look, let me be clear here, all right? It is interesting what we're seeing in regards to the Democrats piling on RFK Jr. He is, let's face it, RFK Jr. comes from a dynastic family, and the Democrats are filled with people who are part of the establishment. But the amount of vitriol and attacks that RFK Jr. is getting, it is quite shocking that the Democrats are responding en masse like this because he's stepping outside their boundaries. So the Republicans, obviously playing this game with the Democrats, want to hear RFK Jr. speak here. Don't get it twisted. There is a game being played, but overall, the message of censorship needs to be brought front and center. And both parties are responsible for silencing and suppressing journalists and people who are free thinkers, for free speech, and so much more. I mean, after all, the reason why we are at the dangerous end of the road for journalism and free speech is because old Trump decided to listen to a couple of people in regards to a guy first named Julian, who's wrongly imprisoned. Just throwing it out there.
The irony and cognitive dissonance from the other side of the aisle, it's deafening. You could cut it with a knife. They are at the same time denying that censorship is occurring, but suggesting that there's more material that needs to be censored. This is a hearing on censorship that began with an effort, with a formal motion from the other side of the aisle to censor Mr. Kennedy. They do not want him to speak, yet that is the topic of this hearing. They have kept him from speaking. A collusion between the government and private organizations. Mr. Kennedy, in your opening statement, you introduced us to this word malinformation. Can you tell us more about this made-up word, what it means, and some of the things that you've said or tried to say that you've been censored for that's been characterized as malinformation?
Yes, Congressman Massey, and if by your leave, I'd like to just respond very
Please.
briefly to some of the what I would call defamations that have been just applied to me by the ranking member. I'm happy to talk to you about my opinions on these issues. What you have stated and tried to associate me with through guilt by association is simply inaccurate. Virtually everything, every statement that you just made about me is inaccurate. I have never advised Black Americans not to receive vaccines. At one point you say I'm anti-vax, and that's a bad thing. The other moment you point out that all my children are vaxxed. I'm fully compliant with the vaccine schedule myself, except for COVID.
And again, a lot of questions need to be brought up with what happened in 2020. Interesting, we don't have Operation Warp Speed for cancer or HIV or AIDS. Just throwing it out there, folks. It's a little, just kind of shocking. It's shocking, ain't it?
I took flu vaccines for 20 years straight. I have never been anti-vax. I have never told the public avoid vaccination. The only thing I've asked for, and my views are constantly misrepresented, so that the truth of what I believe is not, we're not allowed to have a conversation about that with the American people, which I believe vaccines should be tested with the same rigor as other medicines and medications. You tried to associate me a moment ago with the replacement theory, which is racist.
No, I did not say you
Time
had the
belongs to the
replacement
gentleman
theory.
from-
I
I
said
did
my
not-
colleagues.
Time
did.
belongs to the gentleman from
I
Kentucky.
denounce that theory. It is racist, and I have never endorsed it or had any association with it. Our film on a medical, by the way,
Medical apartheid.
Bill Buxton, who is the Black CDC official who ultimately exposed the Tuskegee experiment, tried for years and years to appeal to CDC to stop it for 40 years. Finally, he got relief by walking into my uncle's office in the building next door. He held hearings and ended the experiment. I remember that very well. And to say that I created a film that encourages Blacks not to get adequate medical care is just completely abhorrent.
Don't misuse my words.
It's the
sir.
witness's time. Do not censor the witness.
I'm
if
not
the-
censoring
if
the
the-
witness.
Yeah.
I'm not
if the-
censoring the witness.
And by the way, this is not one but numerous times where he's being talked over. So again, look, this vilification that RFK Jr. is getting from the Democratic Party. Again, RFK, look, buddy, sit down for a minute. You're trying to rebuild or reform something that is incapable of being rebuilt or saved into something that you think it is. The Democratic Party is beyond redemption. There's no saving it. And you're going to have to deal with all those party members that just don't like you. The Democratic Party is filled with neoliberal corporate Democrats who are, again, showing you their true nature. Now, let's say in a hypothetical scenario where the DNC doesn't, put its full weight into the primary, do you have any idea how combative the Democrats are going to be? They're not going to be your friend.
He's still
If
talking.
it is
I don't
it's my
have the
time and I've
ability to
given it to the
censor.
witness. Do not censor him.
I'm not
If they-
censoring him.
If the views that you and others have applied to me, I've attributed to me, if they were actually true, I can see why I shouldn't be able to testify here today. Those are not true. These are defamations and malignancies that are used to censor me, to prevent people from listening to the actual things that I'm saying. And I think, ranking member, that we should have a real conversation rather than an exchange of ad hominem attacks. And answer very quickly to your question, the term malinformation was coined to describe information that Facebook and Twitter and the other social media sites understood was true, but that the White House and other federal agencies wanted censored anyway for political reasons because it challenged official orthodoxies. I'll give you one example. I was included in a group called the Disinformation Dozen. And Facebook and others were asked to censor us, which they did. And by the way, my Heck Aaron post, it was taken down. My whole Instagram account with 900,000 people was taken down because of that. Oh, they knew, Facebook knew that the Disinformation Dozen claim. And what they said was the Disinformation Dozen came from this very shady group called the Center for Preventing Digital Hate.
And again, look, a lot of those videos that RFK Jr. has been in have been taken down. His interview with Hot Boxing was Mike Tyson taken down. His interview with Kim Iverson taken down. Anything in regards to him being on social media is being flagged. If you don't think that won't happen to you, it will. The censorship is all too real.
England that's funded by dark money that should be looked into. They claim that 65% of the vaccine misinformation on the internet was generated by those 12 people. Facebook itself said that is impossible. That is false information. We know that not to be true. And yet, when the White House asked them to censor this Disinformation Dozen, including me, they did it anyway, when they knew it to be untrue.
My time has expired. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Again, outstanding points. But I also want to bring up something else here, too. RFK Jr. was also put on The Rising, where he speaks to Breonna Joy Gray and Robbie. So let's play it.
You testified today about social media censorship, some of it done at the federal government's behest. And as that was happening, right at the start, members of the federal government actually tried to prevent you from speaking. What did you make of that paradigm happening, unfolding in real time on the very issue you were there to talk about?
You know, I was censored. Judge Doty's decision was released 2 weeks ago. It was an extraordinary 155-page decision by a federal district judge, enjoining the federal government from censoring anymore, from colluding with social media. In fact, Judge Doty asked the White House to have no more contact with any of the social media sites because of the magnitude of the censorship. I was in Judge Jody's decision. He mentions that I was the first one that President Biden tried to censor 2 days after he was sworn in. White House officials contacted Facebook and asked them to take down my site, which they did, take down my platform, which they did. They took down my entire Instagram site with 900,000 people, and I had no misinformation on there. They had to make up a new term called malinformation, and that means information that is true, but nonetheless offensive to federal policies. So for a long time, I was being censored both by the Trump administration and by the Biden administration.
And this goes back to my point. Both parties, be they Republican or Democrat, whether there's a Republican or a Democrat in the White House, whoever controls the U.S. House of Representatives or the Senate, both parties are intertwined and connected to the past of censoring free thinkers, free speech, journalists, whistleblowers, etc. So I think it's important that we protect our First Amendment, but also more importantly, making sure that internet censorship is stopped. You know, this whole idea of cancel, 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 censor, 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 it won't solve the problem. I mean, people won't disappear overnight. I mean, I guess what a lot of vote blue, no matter who, or liberals or Democrats, what they want is everyone to be quiet and follow orders. Just go along. Don't be a free thinker. Don't think for yourself, which is never a good path to be on. Again, we live in some very troubling times where, again, people are silenced. RBN, they recently were able to go live on their show yesterday, for which I am so happy that they are. However, what they were struck with, because I saw that with my own two eyes, because I was helping them out, I have to say, the reason why they got those 2 strikes is BS. And it doesn't add up. And if you are for censorship or silencing people, just remember, one day it'll happen to you. And there might be no one left to speak for you.
Once I declared for president, it became more difficult. So now they've started this slander offensive against me to silence me. This was extraordinary because it was a meeting, it was a hearing on censorship. And number one, 102 Democrats signed a letter asking that I not be allowed to talk. And when I got there, the Democrats, each of them, listed all these slanders, all of which are untrue. I've never made an anti-Semitic comment in my life, and I said that under oath, or a racist comment not once in my life. I have a better position on Israel than anybody on that committee and anybody in that chamber. I'm the only one who's asked that President Biden revoke the $2 billion that he's sending to Iran. Oh, but they listed all these libels and then they would not allow me to reply. So they literally made every effort possible to make sure that I couldn't talk. And, the issues that I'm talking about are issues that are great concern to American people, not only the First Amendment, but the economic issues, the destruction of the middle class. We need to be able to talk about those things. And this is what I said to the committee. We're a democracy. The free flow of information is the sunlight, it's the water, it's the fertilizer for democracy. We are riven now by this kind of polarization of name calling and hatred and vitriol and marginalization, and we somehow need to start talking to each other again in a way that's gentle, that's kind, that's dignified, respectful, and understanding.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit about that because I think it was anticipated that the Democrats were going to have the response to you that they had going into this hearing. There were a number of statements that were made over the course of the last week or so that seemed to foreground the idea that they were going to focus on your statements that they characterize as anti-Semitic and avoid the substance of the censorship issues that you were there to talk about. And I wonder what you make of the situation that you're in, where you're running in the Democratic Party. And ostensibly moments like this, hearings like this, are opportunities to bring the priorities that you care about, like censorship, to the public, where they've been siloed for recent history over in a lot of alternative and right-leaning sites. If Democratic electeds are going to have this kind of response to you in a hearing like this, have you thought about strategically how you plan to help Democratic voters prioritize issues like censorship and like some of the other
See, and this is the problem that the Democrats are going to have to deal with, because I think they're losing their quote-unquote Big Tent party. many voters, and dare I say, I like to have hope that younger voters are seeing the Democrats for who they truly are. They never have follow through. They don't. Okay, this isn't open for a debate or discussion. All right, Democratic Party is just as inherently corrupt as the Republican Party. Okay, this isn't open up for a conversation. But the thing is, that's going to be a task that RFK Jr. will have to deal with, especially on the campaign trail when reaching out to voters, potential supporters who will help him out with his campaign. I have to say that this is an interesting path. RFK Jr. is going to have to deal with the fact that voters, especially most diehard vote blue, no matter who people, are happily content with the Democratic lawmakers dictating them their policies or how they should think and feel. We're already seeing the smear tactics and slander that's happening towards Dr. Cornel West, RFK Jr., third parties, independents, people who want to break away from voting Democrat. They're in panic mode. This is what I mean. You can't reform the DNC. RFK Jr., look at what remains of Justice Democrats, brand new Congress, our revolution. Good luck.
Environmental concerns, some of the COVID mandate vaccine concerns that you've raised and which have been very popular in alternative media?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I clearly have the DNC against me. And, it's not a coincidence that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was leading the kind of battle against me. And she's the same individual who was charged with corruption for getting Bernie, who was leading and almost certainly would have won.
Right.
And she led the DNC's efforts to exclude him from the race. So I was not surprised about her attitude toward me. I'm hoping that, Bernie found an audience, despite the fact that the entire power structure was against him. And I think I have even an advantage on what Bernie Sanders had because.
Well, here. I'll keep it short. The reason why you have such an advantage over Bernie Sanders is because Bernie Sanders was a cuck. Okay. He let the DNC screw him over. He tried to be too nice. He abandoned his movement. He abandoned his followers. He allowed his supporters, volunteers, voters to be called Bernie Bros. I saw what happened at the DNC convention in 2016. I saw how Bernie Sanders supporters, voters, delegates were being treated, how they were being attacked, spit on, bullied, harassed, assaulted. I hope you're taking notes, RFK Jr. and RFK Jr. supporters. You're in for a fight, and the game is rigged against you.
That was before there were podcasts, and that was, he didn't really have the ability to talk to large amounts of
Yes, he did. He could have. And he also could have been bringing up the fact that there was election fraud taking place.
Grassroots rank and file Democrats. And I'm hoping that, that will give me a path into the voters in the primary, despite the fact that the DNC is trying to shut me down.
I want to get.
So how should we end this segment? I mean, look, what RFK Jr. was saying, and look, I don't agree with a lot of his policies. I don't. I'm not going to vote in the Democratic primary. I'm not going to vote Democrat. I'm voting independent. So that means my vote will happen in the general election. I'll be voting green, libertarian, independent, whatever's there. That's what I'm going to do. But I do believe in the First Amendment. I do believe in free speech. I do believe that whistleblowers should be protected and not go to jail. I believe that journalists should be allowed to do their work and not be harassed or censored or face jail time. I believe that the internet should be a platform, a public square for free speech, people to share their thoughts and feelings. Shine a light on inherently evil things, so that way we can all contribute and fight for a better future. And are there bad people out there? Yes, there are. But I believe that the world is filled with good people. So I want to end this segment with the words from Tulsi Gabbard in regards towards free speech and censorship.
There's a Representative Landsman from Ohio who said, quote, "Why are we being asked to ban American officials from trying to stop propaganda from foreign adversaries like Putin? Why are some proposing we leave Syria, which Putin wants? Why is the call to abandon Ukraine continuing to emerge from some members?" He goes on to say, "Remember, and I'm quoting him, "Remember, Hitler did this. He used Americans to spread his propaganda, and it cost millions their lives. Putin is doing the same thing." So, to be clear, this congressman from Ohio feels that Americans who dare to say, hey, we need to stop writing blank checks to fund this proxy war against Russia via Ukraine must be silenced. He feels that anyone who says, hey, we need to bring our troops home from Syria are Russian propagandists and must be silenced. This is dangerous because this is coming from people who are in great positions of power to actually act on this nonsense. Now, so far, the Senate has refused to take up this legislation that was passed by Republicans in the House. The court has taken action, banning the federal government from having any contact with social media companies for the purpose of censoring free speech. The Biden administration's response, again, was very bold. They are blatant. They're not even trying to hide it. They said that they're challenging this ruling because they're concerned it will limit their attempts to counter domestic extremism. Who gets to say what domestic extremism is? Well, we can look to them because we know what they say. President Biden declared MAGA Republicans and Trump supporters as the greatest threat to our democracy. Maybe they're referring domestic extremists to the, quote, radical traditional Catholics that the FBI has deemed a threat. Why? Well, in part because they prefer traditional Latin Mass. Maybe it's the parents who are going to Board of Education meetings and protesting against the overt sexualization of their kids that's happening in our schools. Or those who stand up and protest the irreversible mutilation of our kids in the name of gender-affirming care. These are the people that our government, the Biden administration, sees as domestic extremists. These are the people that they want to silence. The Biden administration also expressed that this court ruling would cause, quote, great harm. They're telling the truth. It would cause great harm to their power, to their ability to control us by controlling what information we are allowed to read, what we are exposed to, whose voices we are allowed to hear. What's dangerous about all this is they're directly and indirectly using the national security state and law enforcement, the propaganda media and big tech, all working together in this cabal to silence those who hold views they find objectionable and therefore who threaten their power. They try to intimidate us into silence, into self-censorship by using their smear, attack, and destroy tactics. Hillary Clinton used it against me during the 2020 presidential campaign when she said I'm a traitor, a lie that was repeated over and over and over again. People actually believed this baseless lie.
And again, we here at Heartland's Media talked about that. We covered those stories and debunked those stories on our show way back in 2020. And the Democratic Party is still using those tactics. Going after Green Party, going after Libertarian Party, going after anyone that's going outside the neoliberal driving lane. If you're not frightened, you should be. If you're not concerned, you should be. Because everyone, especially involved in independent media, since 2020, the censorship has only got progressively worse.
Mitt Romney called me a treasonous liar, which as a soldier is an offense punishable by death. Again, presenting no evidence, but calling me this because I said, hey, there are US-funded biolabs in Ukraine that the Department of Defense has reported that in the midst of a war could be compromised and create yet another global pandemic and crisis. We should probably do something about that. That was grounds for being called a treasonous liar. Anyone who stands up and says, hey, we should not be the policemen of the world. We should not be waging regime change wars around the world. Their label for us is You're a dictator lover. You're a stooge for whatever dictator is in question. Senator Rand Paul being called a Putin puppet because he says we should have some accountability for the money and weapons that we are sending to Ukraine. Reasonable request in the wake of all of the waste and fraud and abuse that we saw for the last 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq. We're seeing the same thing happen with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. right now. They're throwing everything but the kitchen sink at him to try to discredit him as a person and call his character into question so that voters don't pay attention to him. They've used these tactics over and over and over again because they work. Most people don't want to go through what we have been through and what we continue to go through. Most people don't want to be called these names. Most people don't want to be on the receiving end of these attacks and therefore resort to self-censorship.
And believe you me, the censorship is real. Outstanding words from Tulsi Gabbard, but also, again, more importantly, what we should take away from that hearing is that we need to make a decision as a people, as a nation. Where do we stand on the First Amendment? Where do we stand on free speech? It must be protected and cherished because once it's gone, those in power will never let it return. So let us all do what we can, not only to stand alongside each other, but to fight for a better future.